We both did mountain things recently, and I've not heard how it went for you, but I think strategically here for this conversation, it would be better to talk about my mountain thing first and then your little mountain thing second, which is cute.
Yeah, I tried. Okay.
No, you did. You tried super hard, and I appreciate it, and I want to hear about it, and I want to take your little mountain thing seriously.
Okay.
I do not want to patronize you just because you're from the American South and I'm from the Mountain West.
I know.
I don't want you to feel patted on the head like you did a nice little thing. So let's talk about my amazing achievement first, and then we'll talk about your thing.
Get me coughing already, Whitman. Let's do it.
Okay, good.
So you took your daughter to a mountaintop experience, like an actual top of the mountain experience?
Yeah, like almost a mountaintop. The intent was for it to be a mountaintop, but we got kind of tired. So we just got close and called it good.
Did you
now,
really?
It's still a long ways up there at an altitude that would be confusing for somebody like you, but we did it and it was pretty good. I'm sorry, I'll stop teasing you. I know you try and I know you have a story you want to tell me and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was great. We went to the Bighorns in Wyoming, which are pretty big mountains. I mean, it's the Rocky Mountain West. You could argue that the Bighorns are the first Rocky Mountain range that you come to if you're going from east to west across the United States. You could kind of argue that the Black Hills, where we live, are that, but they're a lot lower. The Black Hills top out a little under 8,000 feet. The Bighorns get up to 13,000-ish. So it's quite a ways up there.
A long time ago, so being from the South, we're basically a warm ocean down here. We have all the atmospheric pressure a boy could want, 14.7 psi, or if you're in aviation, 29.92 inches of mercury. But we
is that a lot?
That's just one standard atmosphere is what that is.
Sea level.
Yeah, 101.325 pascals. That I just, for some reason back in the day, I just memorized a bunch of units of standard atmosphere. 1,760 torr, I think. I could be wrong about one of these. But anyway, we just have all the air you could ever want here. And I remember a long time ago, a buddy of mine and I, we went out to a business trip to Colorado. And before the meeting in Boulder, we said, oh, man, I hear there's a lot of mountains out here. Do you want to go hike one? Oh, there's a little hiking trail. Let's just go do it. And we decided to go hiking in Boulder, which my understanding is the beginning of the mountains. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a little range that is called the Flatirons that is right there behind Boulder. It's a subset of what's called the Front Range, which is most of the mountains that you see when you drive along where the plains become the mountains of Colorado. Generally, you're looking at the Front Range, and the Flatirons are a little chunk of that kind of nestled back in there in Boulder.
Well, what I know is I was in my 20s, and when you're in your 20s, you're invincible. You can do anything. But we started hiking up this little walking trail, and my heart was a fluttering like a hummingbird, and I had no idea why. And I was like, what is going on? I'm very, very tired, and I don't know why. And it's altitude, right?
Yeah, and it's a thing. Now, you, of course, of the two of us, have been more exposed to altitude deprivation. The highest altitude I've ever been at on land that I walked to or drove to is 14,000 and change. I've been up to the top of a few mountains in Colorado that are north of 14,000 feet. Yeah, you really feel it. I got altitude sickness once on Holy Cross, which is the name of a mountain in central Colorado. And I got right up to the top and I had to come down. Couldn't get it fixed. And as I descended, my heart felt better and my stomach felt better. And it just went away. Just needed more oxygen. I just didn't manage the ascent quite properly, I guess. I don't know. I don't really know how you avoid it. But for the most part, what I feel when I go up really high, goofing around the mountains growing up or even now, is I just get tired faster. And what I found on this trip that I took with my daughter was that anytime I squatted down like in a catcher's stance to set up a tent or fiddle with equipment, I would get really lightheaded after about 30 seconds of that. Whereas normally I could remain in that position for a real long time. Just that little deprivation of circulation because my knees were kinked,
Yeah.
I would really notice it. And when I stood up, I'd need to put a hand on something for a second just to steady myself when we were at, above 10,000 feet.
Did you let her know?
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she gets to know my weakness.
Okay.
That's good. I mean, that's part of her learning about life is she gets to know what my limitations are, and she gets to get a sense of which of those limitations are a result of just how life is and which are a result of I'm in my 40s. And so your body changes and some things are harder.
Let me ask you something. You took your daughter up on this trip to a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Why mountains?
To me, it feels like you and I have talked about this recently, but I've been using the word ordeal a lot lately. If you watch any movie that involves a hero, they will squeeze through a tight place. They will be reborn. They will punch up through dirt. They will be submerged in water and go through an ordeal while in the water. They will go to a mountain and meet with something or experience something in an environment hostile and foreign to them. And the pain of being in that hostile environment, whether it's underwater or subterranean or up on a mountain, is the ordeal. It is what awakens the next chapter in the life of the hero. And there's a reason every story forever, dating back to the oldest versions of stories we know in the world, have this transformative moment. Look for it in any movie you watch. Any movie with a hero will have the moment of the ordeal, the moment of rebirth. Something happens and you're not the same after that. Why a mountain with my daughter? Because I want to be there for one of those moments of rebirth. I was there for the first one. Her middle name means rebirth. I wanted to be there for it. I wanted to see what would happen when we got in that environment, and I wanted her to see me going through change that happens when you go through an ordeal. So we picked an ordeal and we went through it together.
But why do it? Like, why go through the pain?
Because I'm not what I want to be. Because I don't want to become a thing and then be that on cruise control until I die one day.
It's almost like the pain does something. The challenge of going up there is important. So I guess it's not immediately clear, just talking with the third chair here, about why there's less oxygen at altitude. How would you explain that?
Huh. I don't know. That's weird. I've never really thought about that before, but I just know that when you go up, there's less air and you can feel it. And it's a phenomenon that I've been used to for so long, being a kid growing up in Colorado, that I've just accepted it, but I've never thought about why. Okay, here's my guess. You may know the answer to this. You may be just playing with me. Here's my guess. The atmosphere has a compressive effect. It looks like it's nothing, but it actually has weight.
Mm-hmm.
And the more weight that is stacked on top of breathable air, and I understand that's a compound, there's a variety of elements in air, but the more weight that gets stacked upon it, the more compressed that air becomes. And as a result, the air I breathe is more oxygen saturated when I'm at sea level. The further up I go, the less weight there is compressing it down. And as a result, it's not as oxygen saturated. I just made that up. You can now make fun of me.
Of course, I won't make fun of you. I like to think of it like this. And this is a very, very backwards way of thinking about it. The easy way to say it is like, oh, well, like imagine a column of air between you and space. And like the higher you go, there's less air on top. But I like to think about it backwards. So imagine.
Wait.
Yeah.
Can I amend my answer?
Yeah.
Okay. What about this? Theory number 2, and I'm just making crap up. What if it's like, okay, you ever drink from a cup that has a severe taper? Like the top is really, really wide, but the base of the cup is very narrow.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
When you're filling that, it fills to the 50% mark in terms of just its height. It fills very quickly because there isn't as much space to fill with the liquid.
Mm-hmm.
But then as it goes up, the majority of the liquid in the cup is at the top because it's kind of conical, an inverted cone sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's just more real estate the further away you get from the planet because the atmosphere space is bigger up there than it is down here. So maybe the oxygen just spreads out. There, that's my second guess. Now I have 2 guesses.
Well, man, that's an interesting, thinking about the geometry of a sphere as you move away. That's that's very interesting, and I want to talk about that in a
That's
second.
code for wrong.
Well, no, but think about this. You've used a logging chain before, right? Like a
Like to
like a
haul
big,
something heavy?
yeah, like a huge chain, right?
Yeah, you just wrap around on itself and it binds up and you can drag
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
huge.
So
Okay, sure.
imagine in our mind's eye, imagine we're going to take a chain and we're going to pick it up from the end. It's coiled up on the ground and we're going to pick it up.
Okay.
And we pick up one link and then we pick up two links and we're picking up the chain. And as we pick up the chain, we're picking up more links, right?
Sure.
Say there's 100 links to this chain. If I grab it from link one and pick it up, I have to support the weight of all 100 links of that chain, correct?
Of course.
So,
Assuming you're very tall.
yeah, whatever the weight of that link is, it's that times 100. Now, if I were to take that and I were to go down and I were to cut the chain and pick up 50 of those links, then the chain would weigh half as much, right?
Yes.
And so the closer to the ground I get, and like let's say I just cut it down to like two links, the lower the amount of weight is. I like to think of that for some reason, holding a rope. I think about the weight of the rope a lot, but for some reason, in my brain, there's a bucket where I think about the additive properties of mass and gravity and all this kind of stuff. And it's in the same bucket. The reason there's more oxygen down low than up high, it's in the same bucket there. So imagine you're at the bottom of a swimming pool. You've got the water, like you're laying on the bottom of the swimming pool. The pressure in pounds per square inch that is exerted on your body is going to be a function of how deep you are in the swimming pool,
Sure.
right? And so the deeper you go, you ever swam to the bottom of a pool and you feel your ears wanting to pop?
Oh, yeah, of course.
That's all it is, but air. That's the reason that down at sea level, we have 14.7 pounds per square inch on our bodies, or 1 atmosphere of pressure. But if you go higher, you have less pressure because you have less air above you in the swimming pool, so to speak.
Sure. So why does that make there be less oxygen that I get to breathe?
Because the air is less dense, right? Because if the pressure is lower, higher, that means, let's say I take a breath right here in Alabama. And let's say I breathed in, I'm at about 600 to 700 feet of altitude above sea level right here. Let's say I breathed that in. Well, I'm breathing really soupy, thick air down here.
Yeah.
What's your altitude?
Okay, now
where
I'm
you're
going to breathe in at about 3,000 feet.
Okay. Yeah.
Felt still pretty good, but it didn't feel as satisfying as your
It
breath.
didn't feel as good? No,
I
that's
could just
why.
tell.
Yeah, because I'm lower in the swimming pool, the pool being the atmosphere and the gases. You have more gas below you than I do. You know, I've got a lot of gas above me. And so it's pressurized. But that means the air is denser where I am. So for every breath I take, I'm getting more oxygen because there might be 1,000,000 molecules in my breath and there might be 700,000 in yours. I have no idea what the numbers would be. Does that make sense?
Huh. It does, and it raises another question for me.
Okay.
Over the course of the last 15 years, I would say I have lived at an average altitude of 5,000 feet.
Wow.
I was at 6,000 feet roughly in Wyoming. I've been around 3,000 feet here in South Dakota, all in between. So I'm just ballparking. Let's say 5,000 feet. You have lived at an average altitude of 600 feet for that same period of time because you've been in the same place.
Ish, yeah.
Over the course of a lifetime, that means, let's just project that out over 90 years and say we lived at that average altitude for 90 years each. How much additional weight have you carried around over your 90 years compared to my 90 years simply as a function of where you live versus where I live? Because there's actual weight to it.
Oh, wow.
And in the moment, it doesn't matter. But over 90 years, like, have you lifted 10 tons more than me? Have you lifted 100 tons more than me? Have you lifted 1 pound more than me? I don't know, but I'm curious.
Oh my goodness, that's interesting. So if I were to do a free body diagram of the forces on my body, I have the weight of my body, but I also have whatever my surface area of my feet are times the atmospheric pressure where I'm at. Wow. I've never thought about that. That's awesome. So if I were to be right here if I were to somehow be able to transport myself instantly between here and where you live, and we had an absolute scale. So if we just had a cylinder of steel and I put it here and then I take it to where you are and I put it there, would that mean that they would weigh different? Would they weigh different? Because
I mean, I think
the
it would
top
be
of the cylinder has
microscopic.
pressure on it.
It's going to depend on the footprint, right?
It's got to. When you do the rocket equation, there's an area component of it, and it involves the atmospheric pressure on the back of the rocket. That's interesting. Okay, cool.
Okay, so let's imagine instead of a cylinder,
Yeah.
imagine a gong.
Okay.
It's 3 feet in diameter. I suspect there is some altitude at which you could go from sea level up to a certain altitude, and you could have scales precise enough to measure the reduced weight at altitude. Like you take that thing, to base camp at Everest, and you're at 20,000 feet almost, versus sea level or Death Valley, even below sea level, the Dead Sea. There's got to be an instrument that would be precise enough to tell the difference in weight, because it's so much surface area at a relatively light weight that's being knocked down there.
The surface area of the scale itself would matter.
Oh.
Yeah, so I don't think you could take that into account, because the scale face itself, it would feel that pressure. What a fascinating problem.
There has to be a way to do this. There has to be a way to measure the scale.
I also have another dumb question that's similar to this.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
If you think about the Earth-Moon system, is there a scale precise enough to measure, like if I were just to measure a ball and the moon is going around the Earth, when the moon is directly overhead, does it pull on the ball just a little bit versus if the moon is on the other side of the world? I've always thought about that too.
I mean, it's the size of a continent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to, right?
Gravity, it does. I mean, maybe it's just so far away that it doesn't factor in. These are really fun things to think about.
They're really fun things to think about, and I literally never have.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
I just grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we would drive up Highway 14 or Highway 34 and go way up into the high country. We would drive above timberline all the time. We didn't have money growing up, but we could afford gas. And so mom and dad would just take us on mountain drives all the time. We go play up in the mountains. And so you just know, you intuit when the foliage looks a certain way, worried about this elevation. Now it looks this way, worried about this elevation. Now there are no more trees. Ooh, worried about this elevation. And you kind of learn this is what it's going to feel like to run and frolic and play in each of those places. So there's absolutely no science to it for me until this moment, just kind of intuition and what you're raised around.
It's interesting you bring up the different, I don't know what you call those zones of vegetation.
Biomes.
What is it?
Biomes.
Biomes, yeah, because where we went, I experienced different biomes. We did.
Oh, yeah. I'm eager to hear what it is that you did.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's like a hill full of trash at your local landfill.
Exactly.
And they pushed a bunch of dirt over it, and you went all the way up to like 700 feet.
That's right. I'm excited about it. Yeah.
I'm not going to patronize you. I do want to hear about your thing. I'm sure it was adorable.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
sorry.
I'm sorry, but your adventure with your daughter,
meaningful and transformative to go to the top of that covered over landfill pit there in northern Alabama. I'm sure it was great. And you must have been very tired. We'll talk about that.
So tired.
So we went up in the Bighorns, and it was really lovely. It was very moosey. Tons and tons and tons of moose, which is cool because the moose thinned out in Wyoming for a while in the 2010s. There was some sort of moose wasting disease, and now the mooses seem to be doing a lot better. There were a lot of mooses.
Moose wasting disease.
I made up a name. Like I've heard of fish wasting disease, so I just sort of applied it to moose. But there was something that was, when I first moved to Wyoming, there were moose everywhere. And we saw like 60 our first summer there. And then by the time we left, I would only see 5. And I'm in the mountains all the time. I'm fishing and driving and living in the mountains. And they just thinned out. I don't know. Locals had guesses as to what happened. And all the hunters kind of know. They've all got a sense of how many of each species are kind of out there, how all the herds are doing when it comes to the elk. And it was really cool to see so many moose and see them kind of bouncing back.
This is a rabbit trail. I don't want to go down right now, but I do want to just say something. You said moose wasting disease, and that put a red flag in my mind because there is a disease in Alabama right now. It just came into Alabama. It's called CWD, chronic wasting disease.
Okay.
And it affects the deer population.
Okay.
What's causing it is terrifying. It's a
What is it?
prion. Do you know what a prion is?
Sounds like an alien from Doctor Who.
Yeah, might as well be. So a prion, it's a protein that's folded abnormally. Doesn't have DNA, is my understanding. I don't know a lot about this, but it will infect a deer, and then the deer will just walk around, not quite like rabies, but it'll just go crazy, and it'll just waste away. And supposedly, these prions don't affect humans, but it terrifies me. And we need to talk about that another time with someone that's educated on the subject, because I'm not.
So it zombifies deer?
Yes. Yes. We have billboards up in Alabama saying, hey, if you kill a deer, we need to know because we need to see if CWD is spreading. Like, it's a thing, man. Like, if you just look up deer CWD map, if you look up chronic wasting disease, is CWD in your state? And it's a thing. So it looks like it started. Oh, wow. It looks like it actually started in Wyoming.
Dang it.
Yeah, you have it. And it's spreading.
I don't have it. I'm
No,
fine.
it started
This
in
has been a
Colorado.
relatively cohesive conversation.
It started in Colorado, then went to Wyoming, and it's spreading all over the country. And it came to Alabama last year. So it's a thing.
So I wonder if it manifests in all ungulates and you guys just mostly have deer there. So that's how it shows up.
I got kicked in the ungulates one time. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that was me after you rocketed me in the ungulates with that paddle
Are
ball.
we talking about the same thing?
What? What are we now? Huh? Why is this like this?
No, anyway, so there were moose up there, and they weren't wasting. That's great.
Yeah, it was really cool. And big bull moose, like really big. One of them, it was super fun. We were hiking. Our goal was to make it up to Bomber Mountain, where during World War II, a bomber crashed and the crew sadly perished. But if you could see where it is, you'd understand why nobody just went up there and pulled out a bomber. It's not exactly extractable. It isn't up there for posterity. It's up there because it would be cost prohibitive to try to get it out and very dangerous. It's way, way, way up there.
Almost 13,000 feet. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right next to Cloud Peak, which I think is the high point of the Bighorn Range. And so there are two bomber crashes in Wyoming from the World War II era. One is over closer to the national parks, Yellowstone and Teton, near the little town of Dubois, not Dubois, Dubois. There's a whole story behind that as well. And so I've been up into that little canyon where a bomber crashed there. And then we got close, but did not make it all the way up to the site of the bomber crash over in the Bighorn. So it's cool. Like, it's, it's a thing. You go see the two bombers. We went up, we fished a bunch, we camped. It was super buggy. It was beautiful. I dived into a mountain lake to cool off after a day of hiking. It was just delightful. And it looked so deep, but the water was so clear that it was deceptive.
Oh, wow.
So I dived or dove. I never know which one.
It's divin. You divin.
Dived. I divinated into the water. I just felt amazing after this hot day. And I thought, I got all kinds of room here to splash and kick around. So I did a big scissor kick and absolutely gouged myself on this super sharp rock way up high in the mountains. And I don't know. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It's kind of hard to see, but it's right just all the way down this side of my foot right there. And so that was painful. That made for a bit of an adventure.
And you had to hike down. What altitude was that at? Like, when did that happen?
That happened at about 10,000.
Okay, and you were still going up at that point.
We were hanging out at that point. We had a base camp and we went up from there and then came back down.
Yeah.
There were just fun adventures like that. You want to get a little bit hurt. You want to fall into some water. You want to see some wildlife. You want to have a little scare and have to figure things out. We ran into a giant bull moose. It was right on the trail. That's right where we needed to go. And it was super fun to problem solve that together because, it's easy when you look at a satellite map to be like, well, just walk around it. Well, yeah, but when you're actually there, most of that's impassable except for the trail. Mm-hmm. And so we had to figure out how to get around this moose who was not moving and was very attentive to us while not falling off of a cliff or getting stuck in a bog where we couldn't flee the moose if it became angry and pursued us. But also we needed to get back down the mountain while it was still daylight to our stuff. So we had to work out a clever plan to outfox and outmaneuver this monster that was in our path on the trail. And this is great. This is super, super fun.
What was the point of the trip? Like, what were you hoping to do, or what did you want to happen?
I wanted to lightly introduce things that are hard. I wanted her to go to a place where there's absolutely no service or contact with the outside world at all, where everything you need to survive, you have to carry in, and then there's no trash and no burning. So you have to carry every bit of your waste back out. They don't even let you poop in the woods up there. You got to bring a little bag full of lye or chemical and crap in a bag and then drag it back out with you. I mean, it really puts you in touch with what it takes to be a person and what it takes to get by. And I just want to talk about her future and what she has in mind for what's next. And I think we accomplished that. I think it was a really nice time.
That's awesome. And you think you accomplished what you were after?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, we caught some fish, we saw beautiful things, and we adjusted our plan on the fly. I could tell after the hike in, which was pretty intense, and we overpacked a little bit. She was pretty worn down, that from base camp to the top of the mountain was going to be a little bit of a tall order. So we hiked up a long ways, well above timberline, and we fished, and we looked at where we might have walked to, and we called it good instead of making it a miserable thing for her where dad is yelling and forcing her and pep talking her to the top, but now she hurts and hates the outdoors forever. We went until right when it made sense, hung out, had a picnic, and then went back down after outfoxing a moose. So that was it.
I think it's smart to do that. How many nights in the woods did you spend?
3 nights in the woods.
That's legit, man. And you're in bear country. Like that's different.
Yeah. We had the bear spray on the hip, and it's grizzly country, so you can bring a firearm, but it's a really heavy firearm if you want to try to discourage a bear. And everybody I know who has had any kind of armed confrontation with a grizzly comes away saying the same thing. You think it's so big and that you're just going to hit it like in the movies, but you don't. It's just unbelievably hard to hit a bear when it's running at you. So I decided that the value equation wasn't worth it for the massive weight of a big gun. So we just loaded up on a bunch of bear spray, and we had no issues. We didn't see any bears or anything. It worked just fine.
That's awesome. You still had to outmaneuver the natural world, which is fun.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and I caught a trout I've never seen before.
What kind? Is it a spider fire? I'm trying to think of the name of the trout. It's a rainbow whisker. What is it?
Yellow-throated warbler trout. Yes.
Is that what it is? Is it? No,
I think it's a splake. I think it's something called a splake. It has an eyeball that sits up way high on its head. It kind of looks like a sauger, if you've ever seen one of those. And it has a few hints of markings that look like a brook trout, but also a little bit like a rainbow and a little bit like a lake trout. And also it has a wormy pattern on the top like a tiger trout.
Like a tiger. Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at a picture of it online. It's crazy.
It's goofy, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I got a bunch of pictures of it, and I still haven't had total confirmation that that's what I got. But if so, that was my first splake, which I think is a brook trout, lake trout combination. I think that's right. So that was pretty fun too. Hey, this episode of No Dumb Questions is brought to you by the people who support this program, the patrons of the program. We call them the Winged Hussars, who support the program at patreon.com/nodumbquestions. And we did a thing a while back where we reached out to a handful of people at random who support the program and asked if they would do us the kindness of recording a little bit telling us why they support the program, and then figured we would share it with you. So I've got one here. I haven't heard it yet. We'll hear it together right now.
Hey, y'all. My name is Jansen. I'm from Aiken, South Carolina, and I've been supporting the podcast since fall of 2017. I primarily support the podcast because I admire your authenticity and willingness to commit to your families and projects greater than yourselves. And secondarily, I'm holding on to the hope that us patrons eventually get an uncensored version of that one episode where your buddy Lee swears a whole bunch. Have a great day.
So anyways, it was a pretty big adventure, pretty great accomplishment because I'm a man of the West and I do really hard things. But you went on a hike in a local park or did something. You've been kind of coy about it. I wanted to hear about your little thing. So what did you do?
Yeah, you're funny, and you know what I did. We hiked Kilimanjaro in Africa.
Yes, so that's in Africa,
Yeah,
and it rises like Olympus above the Serengeti.
it does.
It's huge. What is the total altitude of that summit?
It was 19,341 feet.
Okay, I want to stop you before you tell me too much about this and ruin it. I think this story is going to be way better if, as I'm asking questions, you're walking me through it, you do not tip your hand as to whether you all or you specifically made it to the top.
Okay.
Let the third chair find out when we get there as to what happened at the end of this and how it actually went down in the moment of truth. Is that okay?
It is. I will tell you this leading
Okay.
up to that without tipping my hand. 17,000 feet is where the brain starts to struggle. I'll just say that. It's pretty uniform. 17,000 feet is when it gets real. You know, I prepared a couple times before I left. You would call me. I was in the gym wearing the Bane mask. It was like an oxygen restriction mask.
Yes. Oh, hello, Matt. You're getting smarter every day.
Yes. So basically wearing a mask that you have to breathe through a little restrictive orifice and doing like all the stair stepper machine time you wanted at the gym. And it was just like grinding it out, trying to train my body to behave well with lack of oxygen. Because that's the big thing. When you get up around that altitude, they say it's like rolling the dice. You know, there's a good chance you're just not going to do well. And so a lot of people have problems. And so we, as a team, there were 15 of us. My buddy, he was turning 50, and he's kind of the big idea friend. And he said, hey, I'm thinking about hiking Kilimanjaro for my 50th. What do you think? And I was like, holy moly. That's a thing right there. He does a lot of work in Africa, works with some schools and stuff over there. It's like, man, that's a thing. And so I was kind of doing the math on it after the fact. He wanted his wife to go. His wife wanted friends to go with her. So Tara was going to go and support her. And I was kind of thrown in the mix. You know what I mean?
Oh, boy.
I was like a bonus friend. And so we all went. There were 15 of us that went to hike Kilimanjaro.
What was the age range?
So my daughter went. My oldest daughter went. She was probably the youngest. She's 17. So she was the youngest. There were 3 other kids that went. And then I think there was a couple in their like 57-ish age group.
Wow.
But they're like hyper fit. They're incredibly fit.
When did you find out you were going to do this trip? How many months before you took the trip?
Probably around 8 or something like that. We made the decision. It's a thing, man. It was a long.
And you just didn't mention this?
No.
Because I knew that you were going maybe 6 weeks before you left.
Yeah.
It just didn't come up when we talked multiple times every day. It never occurred to you. Like, your life is so interesting that you were like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to bore you with this Kilimanjaro life-changing, transformative ordeal of a trip where I come out a different person than I was, but I don't know, didn't want to bother you with it.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, there's a lot to it. Number one, it felt weird because, you know, when you go to all these people that go to hike Mount Everest, which is more than a Denver above Kilimanjaro,
Yes.
people hike and they have Sherpas. They hire a guide and they hire Sherpas to help them get to the top. So part of the deal that we wanted to do, we knew that we were not capable mountaineers. Like, we know this going in. So my buddy did a lot of research. There's going to be 15 people going. And the reason we had to do 15 is because that made the price come down. There was like different price breaks. And so 15 of us went, and we knew we were going to have a guide, and we were going to have porters. In Nepal, the people that help you are called Sherpas. In Kilimanjaro, Tanzania, the people that help you are called porters. We knew we were going to have porter support, and so we found this outfit called Kili Warriors. There's a ton of different people that offer this service. They're guide services, but the one we went with, they were called Kili Warrior Expeditions. And I have to say, they were ridiculously professional. I mean, the experience was incredible.
Real quick, back up to the training. How many sessions of training did you put in before you went? Total number?
Probably 8 in the stair stepper. But one thing we did do is we try to spend time with our family every year. We try to do some type of trip or something where we spend time with the kids. And this year, we looked at the map of the U.S. and we're like, okay, Kilimanjaro is 19,000 and change feet. We know that a lot of people will get to like 17,000 feet and they will just get punched by altitude sickness. And there's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't matter how fit you are.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you're like a marathon runner. Some people just, they're incredibly fit, but like Martha Stewart.
And they would be fine the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that day. I've had it happen literally once and only once. But when it hit me, it was embarrassing. I'm from Colorado. I should be able to do this. I've done it before. I've done it recently, but there was no rhyme or reason to it. And the only way to fix it, I tried to gut it out. The only way to fix it was to go down. So yeah, it happens.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things people were telling us, they were like, hey, Martha Stewart, like the cooking lady on TV, she made it up Kilimanjaro. And then they list off these famous athletes that haven't made it up. They tried and they didn't because they got hit by altitude sickness. Mm-hmm. So we knew we needed to eliminate that factor if we could. Tara and I planned out a trip. We're like, hey, we need to go to the highest altitude in the U.S. we can for a reasonable amount of money. We went to Colorado. That was the highest we could get. We rented an Airbnb and we went to Breckenridge and not in ski season. We did it in off season. And then we went up there and then we went and there were some 14,000 foot mountains there.
Yeah.
And we tried to hike one, but the storm got us, much like your experience. So we hiked to about 13,000, a little over 13,000 feet.
That's phenomenal.
It was pretty significant. Like we could tell we're like, man, our brains aren't working like normal. And that was at 13,000 feet.
And so you know what that feels like because you did the oxygen deprivation chamber.
Yeah.
And you were unable to identify shapes.
Yeah, absolutely. So at 25,000 feet, which is when I did the video with NASA called Why You Should Put Your Mask On First, we went up to FL 250, which means 25,000 feet altitude. I went hypoxic at 25,000 feet, meaning the alveoli, basically the oxygen,
the little fuzzy receptors in your lungs.
Yeah, the alveoli in my lungs, they weren't able to keep up the equation to keep my brain functioning properly, and I went hypoxic. And when they pulled the air out of that chamber, I just I just went loopy. I was concerned about that because I was like, that's 25,000 feet, and we're going to 19 and a half-ish. It's like, that's not that much difference. So I was pretty concerned. Mm-hmm. So we went to Colorado. We did some test hikes. It's one thing to be at that altitude. It's quite another to do physical activity at that altitude, like you said.
Yeah.
So we practiced that, and we did okay. My wife, my daughter, and I, we did fine. But we were certainly very tired. Then we went to Pikes Peak. There's a railway, which is like the coolest mechanical engineering thing I've ever seen. What's it called? The COG Railway?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
I think that's right. Yeah. You had a little miniature version of that in Hurricane Creek State Park between, kind of going south down toward Birmingham, right? You have, it doesn't operate anymore, but there was a little cog rail that used to run up and down to the bottom of that canyon there. Yeah,
it's so cute. Yeah, and there's no way you could get me on that thing now. It's only like 100 feet, but it's scary. So,
I can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. We went up the incline railway up to Pikes Peak. And we could feel it at Pikes Peak at 14,000 and some change. We were like, man, this is crazy. My family got oddly emotional at that altitude. Like we drove up Mount Evans in Colorado on our little trip, and we're going around a curve. And, the curves at the top of these mountains are just so scary when you're driving. Yeah. And I was like, oh, whoa, is the car slipping? What's happening? Just being funny. Dusted! Instantly, like multiple people in the car started crying, like tears.
Whoa.
They're like, "What? This is not funny." Just start.
Were you repentant, or were you like, "I did science and I got results"?
Yeah, I'm like, so sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. That was when we. What are the little animals that you have up at altitude?
Marmot.
What are they?
Marmots.
We call them mountain beavers.
The little yellow-bellied marmot. Yeah, well, they're mountain beavers without the floppy tail.
Oh yeah, what's up with marmots, dude? What is that?
I don't know. I shot one in the heart once.
Did you really?
Yes.
Was it marmot season?
No, it wasn't marmot season. My dog got into a fight with a marmot, and they just both went crazy. And my dog got the black eyes of death, and my wife was throwing furniture at the marmot, like off of the deck, shrieking, you stop it, you stop.
Camilla was throwing?
Yes. No, she's throwing like tables and chairs, like a whole yard sale, just heaving it off of the deck, trying to hit the dog so the dog and the marmot will stop fighting. But marmots are big, man.
Like
and the marmot was doing really
in the
well.
American West during
Yes.
the Wild West. I cannot. Man, this
Matt, get the gun. So
really?
I go down there. I'm trying to, separate the animals. I'm like, well, I'm probably, it's a good idea to have a gun. I'm probably gonna have to put one of these animals down. And I don't want it to be either of them, but if it's got to be one, I want it to be the mountain beaver. So I go down there and my pup won, but they were both a mess, idiots. And so I was like, well, I don't have any ear protection or anything. So I have to put down the marmot. I love animals. I don't kill fish. I don't eat fish. I put them all back carefully and painstakingly. I don't like this, man. But that poor little fella was done for.
What'd the mountain beaver taste like?
Ask the coyotes. So I had to do the thing where I covered my left ear with my shoulder.
I hate that.
And then
try to cover your right ear with your
or I'm covering my right ear with my shoulder, my shooting hand, and plugging my left ear with my finger. I could have gone and got ear protection, but I want to just relieve this poor
and so
animal.
Like you're trying to aim when you got your head cocked to the side. You're not a good shot in that situation. That's hard to shoot.
And so obviously there's a way to put down an animal. And I missed from 2 feet away because of the way I had everything all kinked up.
Yeah.
And I didn't. It took 2 rounds for me to mercy kill the injured marmot. This is just the way of the mountains, man. I know this is going to sound horrifying to a lot of people in the third chair. There's wild animals everywhere. Crap happens. I don't know. So then my neighbor comes out and he's like, what are you doing? But he wasn't even upset. He's like, well, obviously, if Matt needs to shoot something, there's a dang good reason. So I'm like, yeah, a marmot got up on the deck, and then my dog pushed out the door because it was freaking out, and they fought and wrestled and bloodied each other, and they fought all the way down the hill. They fought across the road, and they fought across your property. This is where I finally caught up with them, and the marmot was done for, so I finished it off. I was like, you want me to just take a shovel and go bury it back up on my property? And he's like, nah, just throw it behind my gravel pile. The coyotes will love it. So,
That's
okay.
great.
So
awesome.
the coyotes cleaned up the marmot, and this is the way of nature. Harsh though it sounds, it's true. So you saw some of those. Did you shoot any of them?
Didn't shoot a single mountain beaver. No, we
Did they fight any of your kids?
They did not, but we liked to hear them squeak. They were squeaky, and we liked yelling at the mountain beavers. It was great. So we went out to Colorado. We made sure that we were clear and acclimated to the altitude. And one of the things that I realized really quick is I constantly wanted to know my altitude when we were in Colorado.
How did you track it? What did you use to keep track of that?
Tara had an app on her phone, but it wasn't accurate. I realized we're going to be in Africa. We're not going to be able to charge our stuff. I need a way to measure altitude. And there's 2 ways you can measure altitude. One of them was by pressure, by barometric pressure. Now, the problem with barometric pressure, remember we were talking about the column of air above you?
Yeah.
So if I have a barometer and I just go up in altitude, the pressure is going to go down. And because we know the specific weight of air, you can figure out how high you are based on the barometric pressure. And that's why...
But there has to be wiggle room to that because barometric pressure changes based on climate activity.
Exactly. And that's why every aviator, let's say I'm going to fly into the Rapid City, South Dakota airport. I'm going to call in and I'm going to be like, hey, Rapid City, this is BR 549. I'm coming in. I'd like to request whatever. And they would say, okay, cool. And they would give you the weather. And so there's usually a different frequency for METAR where you get the weather and it goes, the winds are 150. And they tell you the direction and magnitude of the winds. And they also tell you the barometric pressure. And when they tell you the barometric pressure, you set in the old school way is you reach up to your dash on an airplane and you turn a little dial on what's called the Colesman window. So they'll say 29.52.
That is exactly the made up. Oh, stop.
I'm stopping.
That is precisely to the 100th what the made up hypothetical barometric pressure I was about to reel off to you in this question was going to be.
Really?
29.52. That was the number I was formulating my question.
So what that says, if you at Rapid City, South Dakota Airport says, hey,
Okay.
I'm sitting here on the runway, barometric pressure is 29.52. What that tells me is there's a lot of math that has to happen. If I say the altitude of Rapid City Airport is 3,000 feet, MSL or whatever it is.
A little lower, but sure.
Yeah. If I say this is the altitude and this is the pressure, I can set my barometer calibration in my airplane to 29.52. And I know that when I get to 29.52, I'm going to be at 3,000 feet elevation. So that's the way they take into account the drift.
You go backwards. I was already mind blown. Now I'm double mind blown. When they give you that 29.52, that's ground level? I mean, that's what you're going to measure. That's why your weather stuff's at the airport.
That's at the location of the instrument.
Okay.
Or the runway. They're co-located. And so based on all the VFR charts, all the aviator maps, where the runway is, and what the barometric pressure is there. And so throughout the day, that automated system that's blasting out the weather information at an airport, it may have 5 different weather reports. What they'll do is they'll have this automated, and you can do this, just go listen to any airport METAR thing. You can actually call a phone number and listen to it.
Let's call one. Here, let me just pull it up. Give me a phone number.
Let's do that. Here.
Yeah, let's do it.
What are we going to do? Rapid City METAR phone number.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Rap.
Isn't that adorable?
Rapid City, okay?
Okay, fire away. What is it?
Weather ASOS. It's 605 393 2832.
Here we go.
The altitude 5,300. Rapid City Regional Airport. Automated weather observation 194.8 Zulu. Wind 360 at 24. Peak gusts 37. Visibility 10. Sky condition clear. Temperature 28 Celsius. Dew point 15 Celsius. Altimeter 3010. Remarks. Density altitude 5,300. Rapid City Regional Airport. Automated weather observation 194.8 Zulu. Wind 360 at 24. Peak gusts 37. Visibility 10.
You did a really good impersonation of that voice. I want to compliment you.
Yeah, so what they said right there is they said that the pressure is 3010. So what that means is 30.1 inches of mercury.
And inches of mercury is the unit we use to measure barometric pressure.
3010. What that means is 30.10 inches of mercury. That's the atmospheric pressure at the runway. That's a little high. One standard atmosphere at sea level is 29.92 inches of mercury. And what that means is if you were to have a tube that had a vacuum in it, and you were to have it in upside down in a bowl of mercury, the atmospheric pressure pushing down on the mercury in the bowl is enough pressure to support a column of mercury 30.1 inches high.
Does it matter how
vacuum.
thick the tube is, or will it be the same if you have sufficient mercury with any thickness of tube? Fascinating.
It should be the same. I mean, there is going to be some, wetting effects, but nobody actually measures it with a tube of mercury. I'm sure there are some.
Well, they did once.
Yeah, we did once. Now it's done with something called a Bourdon tube gauge, which is a whole other conversation. But long story short, it's interesting. And you're right, pressure does change. And so that's a neat thing. It's just a neat thing to experience.
Well, I can tell you where I am. I'm learning things. All right. So you get on a plane. Where did you connect? Where'd you fly through to get there?
Doha.
Oh, really? Have you ever been there before?
No.
That's in Qatar?
We had like a 5-hour layover at midnight in Doha.
Cool.
We went there, and then we went from there to Tanzania. And in Tanzania, or Tanzania, as a lot of people that live there say.
Really?
Yeah, we were met at the airport by a lady from Kili Warriors Expeditions.
Okay.
and she took us to a hotel, and we had hoped, it's pretty high altitude. There's a Kilimanjaro airport right there, pretty close to the base. And we had hoped to acclimate a little bit before we started the hike, but we didn't get there in time. We had to get there. We got to sleep one time. And in fact, when we got to the hotel, the head of Kili Warrior Expeditions had a meeting with us and also said, okay, here's how this is going to work. You have to carry your day pack. So you're going to carry your water. You're going to carry some food that you need and like some light, body warmth type stuff. And then we're going to carry your duffel bag. And what the duffel bag is that's the rest of your clothes for the rest of the expedition.
So what about like tents and stuff? Who's getting that?
The porters handle that. And
so when you say porter, you mean it in the most literal sense. They are carrying the stuff, not just guiding you on the trail.
Oh, yeah.
Dang.
Not a joke, dude. I didn't know this until we hit the ground there. If you were to take 15 people on a 9-day expedition into the wilderness, 15 people, and these people are, I'm talking about myself, not incredibly savvy in terms of where you are, what you're doing. You want to take all the creature comforts to make everybody be able to survive in legit wilderness. How many people would you want on your team to handle 15 people?
15.
You'd want 15 extra people?
Yeah, I'd want one per, because each person you bring also has to handle themselves.
Okay.
And I have been in the backcountry with people who failed. Something broke, they couldn't do it. I've been in the backcountry with a guy who totally lost it.
Okay.
And I was able to get out all of his stuff and all of my stuff, but I couldn't have done more. So for me,
right.
If you got 15 people and you need somebody to help cover that, I think you need 15 more.
Okay. I thought you were 100% right. That's kind of what I was thinking. I was so very wrong.
Okay, which way?
I've been wrong on things a lot in my life. This particular question is the wrongest I have been in recent memory on anything.
Okay.
So, to get 15 people to the top of Kilimanjaro, they had a team of 90 people.
What?
90.
What?
And so we're in this meeting at this hotel.
You took 105 people to the top of Kilimanjaro.
No, we did not all go to the top of Kilimanjaro. There was this huge logistics effort, and it was like planning an assault on a small village. So I didn't understand this until we got there. I'm like, what are we doing? He's like, oh, yes. And the guy who was talking to us, I mean, he was over the thing. His name was Wilbert. He says, yes, we will be a village. He said, we will be a small village. And I said, I'm sorry. I could have swore you said 90 people. He said, that's what I said. And I said, what will they be doing? He said, you will see. I was like, okay. I mean, this is crazy. And I talked to Tara, and we're sitting there, we're like, what's happening? It was a 9-day trip, 7 up the mountain, 2 down. Okay.
That ratio smacks of truth to me. Okay, hold this thought for a second. I just want to stay with you visually. You flew into Dar es Salaam?
Nope. We flew into Kilimanjaro Airport in Tanzania.
Oh, okay. You said there was one. I didn't realize you flew into that one. So it's a pretty quick trip then. You didn't have a lot of overground travel in vehicles.
3 hours.
Oh, that's still pretty good.
We stayed in a city called Arusha, and Arusha was about 3 hours from basically the entrance gate into Kilimanjaro Park.
So right on the border between Kenya and Tanzania.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And close to Lake Tanzania? Is that right there as well?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I didn't see any water.
Okay. Yeah, I can't picture it. I mean, I know Kilimanjaro is right between those two countries, but I don't know where Lake Tanzania is. All right. Did you see wildlife on your drive?
Very little. Very little. We saw some antelope type things. We saw some turkeys. Didn't see that coming.
I didn't see that coming either. Okay.
A lot of birds, but no, I was like, are we going to see an elephant? Are we going to see? Nope, none of that. Didn't see any of that.
Okay. So Toto are all liars.
Well, I mean, as a Westerner, I mean, you're going into this experience. You're like, I'm in Africa. What do you think? Zebras, elephants, giraffes, maybe lions. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to see.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't see any of that. So the biomes, is that what you said?
That sounded like a term that could be right.
The biomes that you go through when you're hiking up this thing, you first start in the rainforest, and then you go through what's called the heather zone, which is like kind of scrubby brush kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go through something called the moorland, which is, I don't know, high altitude, like not a lot, being a tree kind of thing.
These all sound
It's
like
not
very
much.
British designations.
They do, don't
I mean,
they?
really? Heather and moorland, those are things you
Yeah.
can find on the British Isles. Okay.
After that, you went through the alpine desert, and then you're kind of at the top. And there's, like, glaciers and stuff up there.
Did you
Yeah.
see snakes or spiders in the rainforest part?
Did see spiders, did not see snakes.
Huh.
First night, no joke, dude. 2 incredibly significant events happened within 10 minutes of each other, one of which is for public consumption on the internet here on the podcast, one of which is not. So I will read from my journal entry for you, and then we will just beep part of this out or whatever.
Okay.
Actually, we're just going to gap the podcast. There's going to be a gap here. So I'm going to read the following. My entry goes like this.
Okay. So,
You can't speak to that. Sorry. I'm vetoing that going on the podcast. But an event happened.
an event happened that caused an earthquake.
Well, the earthquake did happen. So
The earthquake was literal.
It was literally an earthquake. So we were all in our tents for the first night. We went to the top of this mountain, and the first day they're just kind of warming you up. What I didn't understand is that our guide, his name is Shadrach.
Shadrach?
Yes,
Like the 3 guys who ended up in the fiery furnace in the Bible?
not Shadrach. Shadrach.
Shadrach.
Yeah.
I think I've seen
And
it that way. Okay.
Shadrach
all
is
right.
an incredibly intelligent individual. Not an exaggeration. One of the most intelligent people I've ever met. He's from Tanzania. He's approaching 40 years old. And what I didn't realize when I first met him is that he was constantly running emotional and social equations the entire time. He was looking at every client on the crew. He was looking at every porter on the team. And he was summing up in his head if they were capable of moving forward. Yes, they took pulse oximetry data every night and every morning to make sure that your body was getting enough oxygen. But at the same time, he was like, that individual is not talking as much today. This individual over here, I'm going to go tell jokes with them. And I didn't understand it until about day 6. But I was watching him and I was like, oh my goodness, he is sandbagging so hard. He's just having fun and being nice to everybody, but he's actually assessing everybody's physical well-being, their mental toughness, their ability to follow orders. It was an incredible display of leadership that has been very rare for me to see, leadership of that quality in my life. It was amazing. It was incredible.
Fascinating. So, I mean, the ideal way to evaluate in education, I think in any setting, the ideal gold standard of evaluation is have someone who is the most attentive, the most intuitive, the most battle-tested and knowledgeable, interact with people and give their expert evaluation. I think it's more reliable than a test, than a survey. Too many variables there. Obviously, you can't duplicate that on a grand scale, so that isn't how we do evaluation in education very much anymore. Only very special programs can do it. But instead of having you guys each go through some simple medical exam or look at these things or take this shape and put it into a box of the same shape, instead, everything was contingent on Shadrach's evaluation, his intuition, his experience. Everything was running through that. And you didn't even know you were being tested? Did he tell you?
It was more than that. No, he didn't tell us at first. He had assistant guides. He was the head guide, but he had assistant guides. He had Ephata. He had Philomena. He had Loma. He had Kanini. And they were all just around. They were all around. They were over here. They're going to walk together, but they're laughing and they're joking. And at the same time, they were evaluating us too. And I later I talked to him and he's like, yeah, I said, Shadrach, it took me days. I said, I'm embarrassed to say it's taken me days to figure out what you're doing here, but you're talking about us in Swahili without us knowing. And you are assessing what we're doing and you're measuring us emotionally. He's like, he just kind of grinned. He's like, maybe. And I said, you have names for us in Swahili that we don't know, don't you? And he said, it's possible.
What was your name? What did it mean?
Oh, the porters named me.
What did they name you?
You know me, and you know that I love people. Like I really, really love people.
Yes, you do.
So you've got the clients, and we had a fancy pants tent, and we would go eat our meals in this fancy pants tent, but there's also a porter tent, right? And that's where the porters eat. And there's 90 porters. Well, there's about 70 something with the assistant guides. But they picked up pretty quickly that I had a camera in my hand a lot. So one guy randomly called me paparazzi. And so they called me paparazzi. They're like, hey, paparazzi. You know, that was my name.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
And so they messed with me. It was interesting to walk up a mountain not knowing. So we started at 8,000 feet altitude, and we decided to walk all the way up.
So you slept at 8,000 first night?
Yes, sir. Well, we slept at higher than that. I want to say 9 or 10 the first night.
8,000 is legit. So as a point of context for you, that would be like the top of Sinks Canyon in Lander, Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
Remember I took you up those big switchbacks?
Yeah.
And then you kind of get up to a new level, a new plateau up there, and there are lakes, and it kind of flattens out for a while. That's about 8,000 right there. As somebody familiar with Colorado is driving up toward, say, Estes Park or the ski areas, that's more than halfway up. And you're getting into really beautiful, clear water, high mountain stuff. Or here's another point of context. I think this is right. The highest point in the Black Hills and in South Dakota is a little under 8,000. And you don't see that altitude again in North America going east.
Wow.
So, I mean, 8,000 sounds paltry given the numbers we've been just bandying about, but 8,000 is a lot, is my point.
It felt like a lot. So I took notes here, and I'll tell you why I took notes. So one of my favorite videos on the internet of all time is on a YouTube channel called Periodic Videos made by Brady Heron.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah, good friend. Brady made a video. One of Brady's favorite things in life is hiking up to Everest Base Camp in Nepal. I don't know, for my money, one of the most heartwarming videos I've ever seen on the internet is a video that he made called Boiling Water at Altitude, or Boiling Water on the Way to Everest, or something like that. And Brady took a tea kettle and a thermometer, and he started his journey from a city in Nepal, just walking straight up over the course of several days, and they boiled water at different altitudes. Turns out Everest Base Camp and Kilimanjaro, they're comparable to the same height. Like when Brady got to his destination and Kilimanjaro was, the top, it's about the same altitude.
Wow.
And so I called Brady before the hike and I said, hey, Brady, one of my favorite videos you've ever done is this one. And I would love, with your permission, to redo this experiment. And I would love to throw people toward your video. But I kind of just want to redo it. And just in a different location because I think it'd be fun. Do you have any suggestions? Or first of all, I asked for permission. And he said, of course, man. Brady was Brady. He was like, man, I don't own boiling water at altitude. I was like, yeah, but I mean, you own this video concept, and it'd be rude of me to do it and just rip you off. I asked for permission, and Brady was enthusiastic about it. And he said he loves the video as well, and he wants any amount of traffic he can get to go to that video. So I was excited about that. Then I asked him for advice. I was like, well, if you could do it again, what would you do? Professor Polyakov on the channel, Periodic Videos, Brady made a follow-up video on everything he did wrong. And the reason you do that in science is so people will do things differently.
Yep.
So one of the biggest things was, I think you should use a thermocouple instead of a mercury thermometer, or maybe it was an alcohol thermometer, whatever Brady used. So I bought 2 handheld pocket cooking thermometers that were, you used a thermocouple in them to display the temperature. So I got 2 of those, and I came home and I opened them and I tried to calibrate them, and I noticed they were measuring different temperatures. So I was like, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take them and we're going to boil water all the way up. And then I'm just going to take the measurements on this thermometer and this thermometer. So I have a book right here. Can you see on the Zoom call here? You see,
there we go. Yep.
I've got altitudes and then I've got like the thermometer temperatures at each altitude.
Does it feel really good to have an old school field notes book written on in pencil, taking actual field notes and measurements?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty legit, man. It looks cool.
Yeah, it was really fun. This is that little moleskin book I got you.
Moleskin. You did.
So it was really cool. And so we did that experiment. I won't talk about the data right now, but it was really, really fun. That was our side quest.
Okay.
And so I asked Shedrack the first meeting, I was like, hey, man, they didn't know about Smarter Every Day. I was like, this is a thing I want to do. Shedrack started joking with me early on. He called me the troublemaker. And he's like, because we became quick brothers. We could kind of, after about the second night, it was no longer my experiment. It was Shedrack's experiment. And I was just along for the ride. So I took lav mics that would record, and I took these thermocouples. And so the way it went down is we would walk into a camp. Sometimes if we had enough altitude gain during the day, we would walk in for lunch, and they would set up a tent and they would cook lunch. Dude, they would cook. It was good. Soups, fried foods, all kinds of stuff. Fresh fruit all the time. And they were hiking these things up. They hiked bread up. All the porters did. So anyway, we would roll into camp. Let's say we're rolling in at lunch. Here's a data point here. It looks like 11,500 feet. We rolled into camp, and then Shedrack would be like, hey, man, you want to boil water? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I'd go over to Shedrack. I had a little box, and I kept my lav mic and I kept my thermocouples, and I would hand them to Shedrack.
What were you filming with?
Just a little GoPro-like camera called the DJI Action Cam.
Oh, yeah. I know the one. Cool.
Yeah, it seemed to be the most reliable. I decided not to take the big camera.
Good.
I decided not to take my big film camera, even though I wanted to. So I just took little point-and-shoot film cameras.
But you brought the Phantom, right? So you could make water boiling at altitude at 165,000 frames per second.
Frames per second. No, I didn't.
75-hour video.
Exactly. By the third day or so, Shedrack would be like, hey, man, we're going to boil after we eat. Or he'd tell me when we would do things. I was like, sure. And I would walk over, hand him the little container that had the microphones. He would open up the box. He would pull out the 2 lab mics, and he would say, here, this one's yours. I was like, oh, thank you. And he goes, okay, this is my thermocouple. This one's yours. And so like you see the emotional shift that happens and how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
So it happened. And so then I was just the supplier of the scientific instrumentation. That's all I was.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the trip, I wanted to know our altitude. I learned that in Colorado. So I bought a Garmin watch that could go for 7 hours 7 days without a charge.
Yeah.
And I could hit a button and I could calibrate our altitude based on GPS, and I could do barometric pressure.
You could. Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. My buddy who was with us on the trip, his name is Paul. He was in the British military once upon a time. And so he had GPS gear. I had the watch thing. And so we had a good time. It was a blast. I would just take a data point at certain altitudes and certain boiling temperatures. And it was fun, man. It was great.
Okay. Let's talk about itinerary a little bit. I want to fill in the whole picture here. You started at 8,000 feet. You set up your little camp. I think it's really hard to picture camp when you're not there. So, for example, on our adorable little hike, which is what we did. Our thing, I think we went 18 miles total.
To be clear, that's more than anybody I know in the U.S. I don't know anybody that's hiked at that altitude in the U.S. It was not a little hike. That's a serious thing.
Yeah, well, by comparison, it's...
I have never slept above a mile high, and you have.
Fair enough. I have slept above a mile high once or twice.
Yeah. How many porters did you have on your trip?
We did not have porters.
Because we had 90.
That's pretty impressive. Our packs were... Mine was 31 and hers was 29 pounds.
Mine was about 20 pounds is what mine was.
Yeah, so we were dragging along a little more. We overpacked. We learned things.
Everybody does.
But on our cute little hike where we didn't even make it to the top of where we were going, setting up camp was really fun. It was fun to pick a spot. And we had ambitions of getting up this drainage a couple more lakes before we shut it down for the night. You're just in a cathedral. There are huge mountains on both sides, beautiful rock formations, snow still, even in mid-summer, post 4th of July, midsummer. And it was just lovely. It was getting toward dusk. I'm not as concerned with setting up a camp in the dark. We can do it. We have lights. But, we want to get situated. You want to know your environment. Ideally, you want to set up while it's light. we got up a little ways, and same bull moose that we ran into the next day was blocking the road, just right on the path, taking his time. So it's like, well, do we wait for a moose to go away and maybe lose our light, or do we just go back and set up here in the last obvious spot? So we turned around, went back. And there were a couple dudes there from, I remember, Gillette, Wyoming or something. And they could tell we were kind of trying to find somewhere. It's very remote. I mean, there's not a lot of people up there, but there aren't a lot of obvious spots. They're called the Rocky Mountains. They're very rocky. And these guys were kind enough to be like, you can be sort of close to us. There's room. Just pull up here. And so we set up camp next to a seasonal pond that was now emptied out next to a big, beautiful glacial drainage lake. We were just above where the seasonal pond crater is. It's all green and grassy now because there's been water in it all spring. And we, of course, we're trying to find a flat spot. And so we probably landed in an area that was maybe 50 feet long by 20 feet wide, surrounded on three sides by real tall pine trees, not super dense, not super thick branches. It was hard to rig up our bear contraption to keep our food off the ground, but also far enough away from a tree that a bear couldn't just climb the tree and grab it. I mean, it's trickier than you'd figure. And we probably had to walk down about 30 or 40 feet and drop about 12 feet in elevation to get down to our water supply or to fish down at the lake.
Did you have a filter?
Yeah. For this trip, we took water bottles. I don't remember the brand, but it was pretty cool. It was like a standard issue water bottle like you'd take to the gym, but you can unlock the body of the water bottle. It's like a casing that goes over the top of, it's like a
Nalgene.
It's like a Russian doll water bottle.
Okay.
Right? A barely smaller water bottle inside of a water bottle. So you disconnect the thing, you fill the casing with water straight out of the lake. Then you take your other one and you force it down in, and that pushes the water up through the bottom of the actual chamber you're going to drink out of. And the force you exert to press the inner bottle into the outer bottle full of water, that forces it through, it filters everything out, and the water just tasted great. Kind of a lot of work to drink 12 ounces of water, but it's better than Giardia. So we did that. So that's kind of the vibe of camp at that altitude in that wilderness area. No fires. I just hate that. I mean, that's how you round out a night and feel the achievement. You burn a thing. The burning is a metaphor for things. You need to do it. It's part of the ordeal. So I hated not having that. But that was our vibe at camp. And everybody wore mosquito nets because it was thick. So we all looked like beekeepers. We made forts out of mosquito nets. What was the vibe at your camp? What did it look like?
In the morning, we would get up, we would eat breakfast that they prepared for us. And they had several rules. They said, these are my rules. The Shadrach and the crew said, I need you to eat. I need you to drink a lot of water. I need you to keep warm. And I need you to have a positive attitude. And those were the rules. And they meant them. So they made you eat more than you wanted. Like, I didn't want to eat as much as they were feeding us. Like, we were like, oh my gosh, man, I'm going to be sick. I'm eating. And a couple of times when I eat a lot of food, the blood flow goes to my stomach and I can feel my heart beating faster, like when I'm doing physical activity.
Okay.
And a couple of times we would start the hike and my heart rate would shoot up to 120, just boom. And I wasn't even doing much. And it was just like I was digesting and hiking at the same time.
Oh, you're north of 8,000 feet though. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
Heart rate goes up quick for that too.
So we would eat breakfast. Well, we'd wake up in our tents and there were two people in each tent. Tara and I shared a tent. My daughter shared a tent with another young lady. At 6:30, we'd wake up in the morning. And a lady, this blew my mind the first time it happened. There was this beautiful, kind lady named Paulina, and she would wake you up along with another guy named Joshua. They would wake you up by knocking on your tent at 6:30, kind of shaking your tent, and they'd say, "Good morning, caribou," which is, caribou is a way of saying you're welcome. "Good morning. Would you like some coffee?" And they unzipped your tent and they shoved a cup of hot coffee.
Dang.
Now it was like paint thinner, but it was.
Yeah, I'd like to try coffee someday.
Yeah, shut up. But I know you have. But they would hand you that coffee, and that would just wake you. And then you had an hour to get your stuff packed and to get to the breakfast tent.
Yeah.
That was harder than you would think.
No, it is not harder than I would think.
Really?
It is exactly as hard as I would think.
It was
an hour to break camp every day. That's tiring. That's quick.
An hour to pack your individual stuff, not to break camp. So the minute you get out at 7:30, you get out of that tent.
You weren't breaking down your tent? The porters did that?
The porters did that, and they were...
Oh, come on, you're being soft. An hour to get your crap? I mean, it takes longer than you'd figure because stuff gets wet and it gets dirty, and you got to fleck off all of the little tag-alongs and junk to try to keep some sense of cleanliness and order, but...
Yeah.
I don't know if you didn't have to break down the tent.
Every day I would get up, and, day one, you're like, okay, well, obviously I packed everything out of order because these are the items I actually need for today. And today they're saying we should prepare for sun, and you always have to be ready for rain because we're on a mountain. And so you had to get all your stuff out, and then, you get the Gold Bond powder and you powder the boys, and, you get everything. I've got 5 sets of underwear, and I got to figure out what I'm going to wear what day.
All this really 20 sets of underwear because each one of those has a front, back, inside, and out.
Exactly. So it was a thing. So once you'd go to the mess tent, you'd eat, and then they'd say, okay, we're ready. This is what we're going to do today. We're going from this elevation to this elevation in this way. And we'd get ready to go, and you'd go get in. And I was the only person in our crew that used the poles every day.
Tell me about the poles. What did you think of those? Okay, first explain those for the third chair. What are the poles?
They're just hiking sticks. If you're skiing, you see skiers use these poles. So a lot of people use them for hiking. A lot of people, I was one of the few. I was the only person that used them the whole time.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm the only person that used them the whole time.
Why?
People just didn't need them. They had good balance. And I was like, the last thing I want to happen is to injure myself. So I was extremely conservative. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I didn't do anything, dude. I did the stair stepper machine at the gym with the restricted oxygen.
Gosh, the stair stepper.
And I did nothing else because I was like, if I just tweak a knee, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And so when we were hiking, I would see, how when you hike, your brain is doing 1,000 calculations.
Yes, well said.
You're like, okay, am I going to walk on this rock or that rock? And you have to choose. 100% of the time, maybe once or twice I took a thing, but almost 100% of the time I took the most conservative path. I was like, I'm going to take these 4 steps instead of those 2 that are higher. And I would do that because I was playing the long game.
So what do you use the poles for? I still think somebody who's never done this, who's sitting with us talking here, they don't understand the poles. Help me get that better.
It takes 3 points to define a plane. And so a stool can sit on a surface with 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I'm taking a step, I'm going to take that pole and I'm going to stick it out in front of me. And I'm going to say, okay, that's a rock right there. That's solid. I'm going to put this pole on that rock. And so I put the pole on the rock and then take a step with my right foot. And okay, cool. And that foot's in the correct position. I'm going to take my other pole and I'm going to put it over there and I'm going to take a step. So I always tried to maintain at least 2, often 3 points of contact with the ground.
Yeah. And these poles, don't think
they're
Gandalf's
telescopic.
staff,
they're really lightweight
think
poles.
Ski poles.
Yes, sir.
You have a pointer on the end of it?
Yes, there was a little pointy metal piece. I did not have a basket on the end of my poles, which is used for snow. Yeah, did not.
See, I like those for snow and mud.
Correct.
They just keep you from going in
Sinking
too far.
Yeah. I was one of the only people that used them. Everybody else just kept them clipped to their backpack. I'm like, man, I got them. I'm using them.
In defense of poles, I think they are incredible in those environments because you can help lighten the load. You can make your shoulders, your biceps, your forearms, your wrists, whatever has energy, you can transfer the effort of climbing that mountain to that part of your body using the poles until something else recovers. And I just adore that. And I've got different modes. When I'm kind of wanting to take ground, I put my hands on the pommels on the top like an old man would do, like an old man cane. And I put them behind me and I'm pushing forward. The poles are always a foot behind me. I stretch them out to their greatest length and it's like I'm rowing forward Love the way that feels.
One of the assistant guides, Saji, he taught me, he's like, hey, when you're going uphill, you want your poles short. When you're going downhill, you want your poles long.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that's how an angle works. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that's what I did. We'd get all your stuff on after you eat breakfast, and then we'd go. And the minute we start hiking, the porters would break down all of camp.
Fast?
Extremely fast. And they lined up. They literally got in a line, and they all had a huge duffel bag in front of them. And the lead guide would go down the line, and he would say, okay, I need everyone to carry the porters. He had every porter carrying a certain amount of weight. I forget what it was. It might have been 10, 15 I don't know. It's about 30 or 40 pounds. They would all carry a very significant amount of weight, but they distributed it evenly. I developed a relationship with a lot of the porters. And so I would go up. There's one guy, his name was Saidi, Saide. And so he didn't speak much English. And I'd just go up and give him a fist bump. He'd go, paparazzi. I was like, Saidi. We'd talk. And I would say, what are you carrying today? And he would show me. I would always say, thank you. Asante sana. Always say, thank you so much for doing this. And we all agreed, all of the clients, we agreed that it was humbling and we felt bad the entire time. Like, yes, we paid for this guide service and we paid for porters to help us. But in our community, a lot of these people, you know them well. And the type of people these are. They don't want to be served. They just don't want to be in a situation where someone is serving you. Like, to bring me a cup of hot coffee in the morning while I'm in my tent, that means you got up early. And that means you went and got water and you heated it up. I don't know. It was just a very, very difficult thing to be served like that. And so it was humbling. It's a weird counter thing because they were simultaneously exalting you, but you were humbled by the experience. And it just, I don't know, you would have, I think, felt the same way.
Yes.
Yeah, we did that sort of stuff. They broke down camp. They divided up all the gear. They made sure everybody had an appropriate amount of gear. I learned that it's better to carry a short, small, compact 15 kilograms than a big, wide basket of bread, for example, that's 15 kilograms. Like, you want a very dense pack. And the porters were very skilled in how they carried things, and they were extremely fast. They loved you, like genuine love. At the end of the trip, we got to say something, and we were like, hey, we figured out your secret. Your secret is, yes, this is a job, but you do actually love us. And your little community here of fellow porters, you love each other. There's a brotherhood and a sisterhood amongst you. I loved the culture. I really did. It was fun. So we'd get up, break camp, and then we'd start walking.
Was camp huge? Was it like a little city with streets and alleys and stuff?
There were 2 bathrooms, meaning they had a tent that was like just a single person vertical tent, and there was a small toilet about half the size of a 5-gallon bucket. It was a Western looking plastic toilet.
Okay.
And night one, he taught us how to use it. It's like, here's how it works. You do your business here. You push this little button here and it pumps water into it. And you pull this little thing and it'll open up a hole and your waste will go down to the bottom and then you close it. They hiked waste off the mountain, dude.
They didn't do incinerator toilets. They carried out the waste.
It's incredible. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever used an incinerator toilet?
No.
Same concept. Instead of falling down into the bottom of the bucket, a compartment that keeps the smells and everything muted by sealing up and having a fluid in it, it falls down into a burn chamber.
Wow.
Then it just cooks everything into a little dust that is tiny and meaningless and goes away.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they didn't use incinerator toilets, but maybe the problem there is that it takes a long time to incinerate.
Or fuel.
And it's getting a lot of use. I mean, that's
fuel is heavy.
A lot of people using those toilets. Yeah, it's wild. The stuff you don't think about, right?
Well, the thing that made it really difficult is they recommended that we all take a drug called Diamox. And
Diamox.
Diamox. But there's a big... Shedrack was extremely intelligent, and he knew the actual name of the drug. He also knew all the Latin names for all the flora and fauna, which was awesome.
Dang.
But he knew the actual name of the drug, but the generic term is Diamox. It helps with oxygen exchange and altitude sickness, but the side effect is you have to pee all the time. All the time. I have no idea. It had something to do with pulling the sulfur out of your body or some other chemical out of your body. I don't know. I would be lying if I said something.
Did you take malaria meds as well?
I did the first few days, and then once we got above 8,000 feet, they're like, yeah, there's just no mosquitoes here. So,
Did it make you taste metal in your mouth and dream crazy things?
No, that's mefloquine that does that. We were taking Malarone this time, but mefloquine, the once a week drug, in my past experience, dude, you will have nutso psycho dreams.
Yes. I finally quit. I was like, just bring on the malaria.
Really?
I can't do. Oh yeah. When I was teaching in Zambia, I'd be there for a long time teaching those college classes. I was way out in the bush.
What did you teach in Africa?
I taught history of thought, world civilizations, and history of philosophy and thought. The college there's a big land grant to this college that I worked at, but it was way, way, way out there. There was no meaningful road. I mean, the worst road I've ever driven on, all the way in, all the way out, is a remarkable thing. You just couldn't imagine driving out there that there would be a college. But then you get out there and here's this thriving community, and it was really quite the thing. But it was remote. All the animals out there, all the wild stuff, and lots of mosquitoes, lots of malaria. Man, I ran the value equation after several nights of those dreams one time. I was like, I bet malaria is horrible, but I can't function. I can't work. I'm not sleeping. It was a whole category of dream I'd never had before. You know, you got your categories like scary thing is happening and you can't respond. Yeah. That's one of the categories. Can't run, can't talk, can't scream out for help. There's that one. There's socially embarrassing category, naked at school or whatever. I think
or wearing clothes
has
at school on naked day.
Yeah. There's not nice, not appropriate dream where you just wake up and you're like, okay, let's just pretend that I didn't dream that. Whoops. Then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know, you got all these categories. I had categories of dreams. Well, another category dream that I have is completely cohesive narrative that I wake up and write down and the story works.
Yeah, I know, right?
Those are awesome. Just love them. I think I've told you before about the one dream I had where I lived a whole life. I met a girl on a riverboat. We were both in 5th grade and we fell in love and we got married when we turned 20 and we had kids and I knew their names and I knew her parents and we had weddings and funerals and I went to college and I learned things and I got older and eventually people I loved died and I was old and then I woke up and like that was my wife and I had kids and I had grandkids. All of this was I was in 5th grade. We moved a bunch of things around and my sister got bumped down to the couch while we were doing a project downstairs. And I had her yellow bedroom that one night that I slept in there. And I had this whole dream where I lived a whole life and learned things in the dream. And when I woke up, it was like I could feel all of my education and all of my memories from this whole life emptying out in this one dream. And I started to grieve and panic as I realized I'm a 5th grader. I remember this like it was yesterday, dude. This is one of the most impactful things that ever happened in my life. And I realized like, oh crap, like I haven't gone through puberty. I'm a 5th grader. I don't have a wife. I don't have kids. Oh, what were their names? And I'm trying to like remember their names and remember stories. And I went into my parents and I woke them up. I'm like, a thing.
I'm dying.
I like my whole life is disappearing. It's the hardest thing to possibly explain, but I had that dream.
That's like Inception, the movie.
Yes. And I don't think that was as psycho as what I had when I was on that malaria medicine, dude.
So you woke your parents up and told them that?
I woke them up and tried to explain to them as the memories are just Inception style collapsing out of my brain.
Let me tell you the last time I remember waking my mother up when I was a child.
Yeah.
I remembered, bless her heart, Mom worked 3rd shift to make things work for us. And I walked in there one day and it was like the weird twilight, like sun's about to go down. She's trying to squeeze her last bit of sleep in before work. And I'm like, hey, Mom. She's like, what? I was like, I just wrote the best S I have ever written. She's like, what? I was like, look at it. It's a beautiful S. looking back, and I was thinking, oh dear. And then here you are. You're like,
The
I
contrast
just had a
between
generation
your
of
story
life.
and mine.
Very different.
I lived 2 lives completely all the way to the end, and now I'm reverted. It's 2075 in my timeline, and now I'm in 5th grade again.
But look at the S, man.
It's so good. Look at all the curves.
Anyway, so malaria meds, yeah.
Apparently, yeah, they do. Apparently, it never wore off.
On
Okay.
night 2, some of the ladies started to admit some of the dreams they were having. Or morning 2, they started saying, "Hey, I had a really, really bad dream." And like, yeah, what is it? And then they would say, and I was like, "Do not repeat that to anyone." And one of the common things was, I had a dream that we were at the top of the mountain,
Yeah.
and then somebody said, "Was I there?" Like people were like, "You had a dream we made it? Was I at the top of the mountain?" Because we didn't know, right? We don't know if we're gonna make it or not.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What a fun thing to have that conundrum, that plot device driving the unfolding of the whole story. Whereas for us, with our adorable little hike, we had no pressure like that. I knew from the get-go, I'm going to go as far as it feels like makes sense to make this a win for my kid. For you, come on, you're flying halfway around the world. It's one of the few mountains that, I mean, it's got to be one of the best known mountains on Earth. If you asked
one of the
anybody
7
on the
summits.
planet to name 3 mountains, that one's going to come up in just about everybody's list. It's a huge deal. Can you or can't you? Will you or won't you? And so I don't think it's any surprise at all. That's what everybody's medicated subconsciences were trying to sort through on the way up.
And what really started getting weird is like day 4, they said, "Hey, I regret to inform you that we had to send 3 of the porters home." They went back down the mountain, and we're like, "I'm sorry, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, we had someone that became ill, and we sent 2 porters with them." Like, what happened? And so we're like, "You're the porters. You're our lifeline. Somebody got sick," and so we're freaking out.
There's only 90 of you.
Yeah, that's right. When it started getting real was day 6. So day 6, the rule of thumb. Now, Tara, my wife, is a physician's assistant. She went out in New Mexico. She went to a mountain, like she has to do continuing medical education credits every year.
Sure.
And so this year she elected to do a mountaineering training course. Like she's a certified mountaineering medical, whatever you want to call it.
Awesome.
And so she did this a few months before we went. So she learned that what you want to do is you want to hike high, sleep low. And you do that to acclimate your body. This didn't make sense to me, but there's one day we hiked to 15,500 feet. That's where we were going to sleep. And they said, "Okay, everyone, we have time. We're going to do an acclimation hike to 16,000. I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, so we're at 15,200, 15,500 in that area. We're going to leave our day packs here, and we're going to get a bottle of water, and Destin, you can carry your little sissy poles or whatever, and we're going to hike up to 16,000, and we're going to come back."
That's discouraging.
It is.
That's
because you're like,
1,000 feet of gain.
I just worked for this, and
that is very hard for people in the third chair to appreciate. 1,000 feet, 11, 12 base paths, 2 very long disc golf holes, but up.
Yeah.
You give a part of yourself up to gain 1,000 feet at that elevation, and then you turn around and you handed it right back to the mountain. That's tough.
But what I didn't understand, and this is what Shedrack and Saji and Loma were telling me, they said, "Yeah, here's the deal. It doesn't make sense, but we're going to hike up that mountain, and that's going to tell your body how much oxygen is up there. And it's going to tell your body something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to come right back down." So I don't know the mechanism inside the body. The way the differential equations of the body works, when you're doing respiration, you're like, "I got this much oxygen." And it's something that starts making red blood cells in your body. And it says, "Hey, this is how many red blood cells I need." They said, "We're going to hike up, and then we're going to hike back down. And then when we do that, that will help us for tomorrow." And that's what we did. We did that, but that's the day it got hard. Because the following day, we took what was called the Northern Circuit. So we hiked around, imagine a crater. And imagine that you're approaching from the west side of the crater, and then you're going to go up around the top of the crater, and then you get over to the 3 o'clock position on the crater, and then you
Yeah.
cut in to the lip of the crater, and you go up to the peak. That's how we hiked
Great
it.
description. I can picture that exactly.
When we got to 16,000-ish feet, that's when it was game on. Some of the only wildlife we saw while we were there was a dead buffalo, like a dead Cape buffalo up at a certain altitude. It was interesting. But anyway, the day of the summit, we wake up and they said, hey, here's the deal. Everybody's going to wake up at midnight and they're going to go to the summit and they're going to be at the summit for sunrise. We're not going to do that. We're going to wake up at 3 a.m. and we're going to make it almost to the top. And then we're going to see sunrise on this side of the mountain, and then we're going to push over, and then we're going to see it. And so that's what we did. So at 3 a.m., we all got together, and a couple of times before the porters left on a couple of days, they would sing and dance.
Oh, churro. Bipi coco.
Getting pumped up for the day. And it was very clear, like, they are trying to pump us up, give us positive attitudes. They're trying to do it. They're imparting that to us.
Had you yet felt despair?
Yeah, at times people did. No joke.
Did you feel despair?
No, did not. No, just stubbornness, just like, I'm going to just go. There were times when I was, you're kind of wondering, you're like, man, there's 15 of us in the line. Everybody seems to be doing really good. And I had my heart rate here on my watch, and there's one other guy that was with us. His name is Lawson. He also had his heart rate on his watch. I was like, hey, Lawson, what are you at? He's like, I'm at 120 beats per minute right now. I was like, me too, man. We were like, we're doing okay. We're about normal. There was one time at about 14,500, we got done with lunch. I wanted to take a selfie with a dead buffalo, and I ran to the buffalo to take a picture. And I ran back, and I got to camp, and I looked at my watch, and my heart's going 130, 140. And I looked at them, and I was like, guys, I just made a mistake. They're like, what do you mean? I said, don't run. Just do not run at this altitude. Because my heart, it took well over an hour for my heart to get back down.
What altitude was this? Is it 16?
This was 14-ish. Yeah, it was. I remember the camp, but it was not smart, dude. It was one of the only times I took a risk, and I did it because I felt like I was holding people up.
Sure. Yeah, I can see
And
the psychology.
if I had it to do over again, I would not have done that. It was so very stupid.
Show me the selfie.
I'll do it. Let me get it right here. And then you can tell me if it was worth it.
That's exactly what I was going to do.
There it is.
Wow, that is a very dead Cape buffalo.
If you look in the background of that image, you see the clouds. Do you see the clouds?
I do.
You're looking down on them. You
Yep.
see that?
I'm oriented. Yep.
Yeah. It was nuts. And so it took me a long time to recover from that.
Speaking of taking photos of dead, rotting buffalo carcasses, this episode of No Dumb Questions is brought to you by Company Cam, which is about organizing photos that you take, but not of dead, rotting buffalo carcasses. I just said that for the segue.
Luke is your friend, man. You can't... Look, Matt.
He is my friend. That's why I know he's going to like it.
Look, when you do an ad... Okay, so here's how this worked. I don't know if you realize this. Company Cam has decided to sponsor this episode of No Dumb Questions, right?
That means they give us money.
They give us money.
Yes.
And we have to talk about their product in a true way, but also usually it's favorable. And I don't think Luke wants Company Cam associated with the types of photos you just explained. Plus, that doesn't even explain the purpose of their company and like why people might want to use Company Cam.
Yeah.
So I know you're like, we're 100-something episodes in, but I really would have thought you figured this out by now.
Well, here's the thing, though. If you were doing a project that involved a dead, rotting buffalo carcass on the side of a giant mountain in Tanzania, you could use Company Cam to organize that photo. It would technically work. So
You know what?
I feel like what I did was right.
You're joking, but this actually makes sense.
Continue.
So the guides on the trip,
Mhm.
they took photos along the way and they updated our families on the internet.
Ha!
They were like,
Ha!
hey, they called us the big group. The big group is doing great. no joke. There was one of the guides. His name was Ephatah. Ephatah would, early on, when they called me paparazzi, as I told you, basically said, hey, you know how to take photos. How do I take photos? And so Ephatah brought me aside. He's like, hey, man, I looked at some of the photos you took yesterday of our group. They're great. Tell me how to take better photos. And then Ephatah would run up ahead of us and he would wait for, we were all in the line, and then he would take a photo, and then that photo would go on whatever social post he was doing. But the point is, our group, the 15 of us, we were their job.
Uh-huh.
And no joke, your buffalo rotting carcass joke actually would work with Company Cam, because the purpose of Company Cam is if you have a job that takes place over a long period of time, a photo is worth 1,000 words. So you document the progress of the job with a camera, usually on your phone, and then you upload it so that you can show and verify that, yea, verily, the work has been done. That's what Company Cam does for contractors. So in this case, the company we went with, our guides, they could have used Company Cam to document the process of getting us up the mountain.
Yeah, I guess I could have. So do you have anything that you feel like you need to say to me now?
No, I don't.
Anything morally,
No.
ethically, any outstanding burden as a friend?
No.
Anything?
Okay. I apologize, man.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
okay.
You actually
you didn't
do
have
make
to
a
do
ton
that.
of sense.
Good heavens, apology accepted.
I didn't have to do that. Your buddy, like, in all seriousness, your buddy Luke is awesome, and he has decided to sponsor Notum Questions with his very successful company called Company Cam. And if anybody out there is a contractor, or you're doing anything that involves, like if you're building a bridge, if you're doing whatever, and you want to document the process of getting the thing done, Company Cam is a great option to do that. Please go check it out. How do people find Company Cam?
Yeah, just go to companycam.com. We would be grateful if, when they ask you how you heard about it, if you would select podcast and put in No Dumb Questions. That way they know that you came there from us. But you go there and you'll be able to download a trial version of the app. They will reach out to you to help you learn how to use it, learn how to get the best use out of it. But you can try the thing out for free and fiddle around with it. You're smart. If you're the kind of person who would want an app like this, you're the kind of person who will be able to install it on your phone and figure out what's going on pretty quickly.
Yeah, you can also find it in the app stores. It's there, Company Cam.
So I want to say a huge thanks to Luke and to Company Cam, somebody I've known for a long time and somebody who I admire for getting what we're going for with No Dumb Questions, for sponsoring the show. As always, I want to say thank you to all of you in the third chair for supporting the sponsors, because when you do that, you support the show as well. CompanyCam.com, or check out Company Cam in the App Store.
So the day of the hike, the day of the summit, woke up at 3 a.m. We all put our hands in the center and we're like, 1, 2, 3, Kili. We all said Kili on 3. And we did what they called pole pole. In Swahili, pole pole means slowly, slowly. And so they said, you're going to walk very, very slowly. And Shedrach took the lead and he walked incredibly slowly. And the goal is to keep your heart rate in that you're regulated by your cardiovascular system and your pulmonary system. You get it to a steady state heartbeats per minute and you don't move. You just keep it at that rate. That might mean slowing down the higher you go, but you keep your heart rate at a sustainable pace. And that's what we did. And about 400 feet in elevation into the hike, we're hiking by headlamp. We are wearing an incredible amount of gear because it's very, very cold at the top. We had to carry these big, where our porters helped us, but we had been packing these huge ski clothes the entire time just for this day. Because we know we're going to go from 15,500 up to 19,300.
You're doing that in a day?
Yeah. And then all the way back down to 15 something to Barafu count. They didn't tell us about the day, man. That was a 12-hour day. When we started hiking, we're up about 400 feet and gaining elevation off our camp. We started realizing, holy cow, it's happening. This is the day. Can I do it? Am I actually capable of this? They say people start dropping at 17,000 feet. What if we get there and I drop? What are we going to do? Internally, you start having that monologue, dude. At that moment, the porters started singing. One of the most peaceful, haunting, in a good way, songs I've ever heard. But when they started singing, like this peace came over us. It's like, wow, they knew exactly what they were doing. We just slowly started hiking. And Kanini, one of the assistant porters, who was an older man, but Kanini could read people and he knew it was time to sing. And he would sing, and all the porters sang. And there's nothing you can do. You don't know the language, Matt. You don't know how to sing the song. You don't know the words of the song. Every once in a while, you can pick out pole pole, which means slowly, slowly. But you can tell that it's a song of, I don't know, like overcoming, like
A song of ascent.
ascent.
Ascent. They're psalms of ascent. You sing them when you are going up to the temple to worship God. As you proceed up to this place, this elevated place where the worship of God happens in the Old Testament. And in Nehemiah, toward the end of Nehemiah, there's a whole scene where Nehemiah puts together the dedication of the walls of ancient Jerusalem that he oversaw the rebuilding of. And they're all singing these songs of ascent, two choirs snaking together along the walls and intersecting. And all of the crowds, the kids, the women, the old people, they're all going up together to celebrate this thing, this generational achievement that they all just accomplished. In the book of Psalms in the Bible, such songs that you would sing on such an occasion like that, I picture them being very solemn, very reflective, very encouraging. And those are Psalms of Ascent.
There is not an equivalent thing in our culture in America to what I experienced in that moment.
Fair enough.
It was incredible. We all felt it, and we all wanted to say something, and we all kept our mouths 100% shut, and we just listened. I mean, I think I said, "That's beautiful." I think that's all I said. But we were just like, it was just amazing. And so we hiked in darkness for 2.5, 3 hours. All we were looking at was the people's feet behind us. And then the sun started coming up behind us, over the mountain behind us, which is another peak there. I want to say it's called Mount Meru. I may be wrong about that. One of the other peaks of Kilimanjaro. It started coming up behind us. And as it came up, you could see the sun coming up over the clouds. You're like, man, this is incredible. Then at about 17,500 feet, something else happened. We looked up, and there was a man, a Western man, being rushed down the mountain. He had a guide on his left and a guide on his right. He had an oxygen mask on his face, and you could see oxygen pouring out of the mask, and he's not okay. He's being rushed down the mountain with a person. He's making contact with the ground like every third step. He's being drugged like a zombie down the mountain by these people on his left and his right. And we look up at that as the sun's rising to our back, and we're like, he's not okay. This guy has altitude, whatever. This is not altitude sickness.
No, that's edema.
This is a rescue situation. And they were running him straight down the mountain, which at this point is like sand. It's like straight up loose gravel sand.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just having if you were to step on an 8-inch rock, I said, here comes a rock. And I have a video. I was like, here comes a rock. And I can't explain, but that rock is going to take all my oxygen. And the moment I said that, Lawson stepped up on the rock. He got one foot up and then the other foot up, and he just stood there and he breathed and he breathed and he breathed. And he's like, okay. And then he started walking. And then I had to do the exact same thing. And so that's the environment that you're in. And when that guy starts rushing down the mountain, in that moment, at this point, we had about 12 guides and porters with us, one of which volunteered to carry a gas bottle so that we could boil water at the top. At the moment when we saw this guy, we start freaking out. Every one of us started freaking out. And we didn't tell anybody we were freaking out, but it was all in our heads. And Kanini starts singing again. And he starts singing. The point of the song was clear. Shut up. Quit worrying about it. You follow Shadrach, who's at the front of the line, and you keep going. And you don't look at that man, and you don't worry about it. But it was a deal, man. Do you have your iPhone with you?
Yes.
I just sent a 4-second video clip to your phone Just understand that this video is a lot brighter than it actually was. Imagine it's twilight. This is the only clip we caught of the guy coming down the mountain. Somebody on the team caught it, but look at how he's walking. Can you see it?
Oh my goodness. Okay, first of all, I can hear the wind. That guy's not there. He's beat up.
He's not there, dude. It was a thing, dude.
He would die if not for the people on either side of him.
Yeah, he was like me in the video, the I don't want to die video.
Did he die?
No, this guy did not die. But he was like me when I was in the hypoxia video. Like, he clearly is not there.
Yeah.
That freaks you out. I just sent you another video of the mountain to our backs. We're hiking away from this peak where the sun is rising over. It was a thing, man. And so at that moment in time, we had a couple of people in our crew that started having problems. It was clear that a lot of the problems were in our heads, right? The guides did something amazing. They stopped everybody and they got together with the people that were struggling and they said, what's going on? Okay, so your feet are heavy. Okay, got it. Understand. And then Shedrack just systematically defeated the mental game. He got another guide. He said, okay, Saji, come here. Saji, your job is now to walk with this person. You're going to walk in this way and that. I would have fallen back and taken the person that was struggling and put him in the back of the line. That's not what he did. He took the person that was struggling and he sent them ahead like a sprinter. And he said, get up the mountain. And they did. They just went and he grabbed the person's hand or their arm and he just went straight up the mountain. They got 100 yards in between us and them. And they got to Gillum Point first, which was the first peak. And once they got to Gillum Point, the mental game was over. We were at 18,500 feet. I'm like, okay, it's only 800 more feet. We can do this. Everything leveled out.
Okay, so one of two things are happening right now. You are either setting up to tell me that it seemed like it was a done deal once you got to that point, and then to give me the twist in the story, which is then something bad happened and we did not make it. Or it really was a done deal when you got there and you closed it out. $1 billion question. Did you make it?
We did. We made it. So we got to Gillum
Everybody?
Point. All 15.
Huh.
And Shedrack and the crew said, we had a meeting several days ago, and we decided that your group was strong enough for everyone to make it. And the reason we decided that is because everybody was staying positive, and we decided you were physically strong enough. That wasn't going to be the issue. It was going to be the mental game. And we decided that because you're encouraging each other along the way, we had no disputes. We had no bickering. I mean, we just all were working with each other. It was 14 people from Alabama. We had another guy, Brian, from Ohio that went with us. But we just all were rooting for each other. One person had more altitude type symptoms than others, and we were all like rooting for them, praying for them, helping them any chance we got. It was great. It was a great group of people. But Shedrack revealed to me at the top, I said, hey man, all 15 made it. Is that normal? He said, this is not normal. He said, it is not normal for a group of 15 for everyone to make it. This is actually rare. He said, usually you'll have at least 2 or 3 that can't. But we all made it, and it was a testament to, first of all, glory to God for making it, because, I mean, it's just like rolling the dice, right, whether your body can handle it. But the fact that the leadership of Shedrack and his team at Kili Warrior Expeditions, I don't know, it was really fun. It was really fun to be in a position of weakness and to be given a challenge and to have an opportunity to rise up and try to tackle it just by obeying your leader and doing what your leader said. Like, there was one moment where my daughter wasn't putting on enough sunscreen, and Shedrack pulled me aside. I wouldn't say he disciplined me, but he told me what to do. He's like, I expect her to wear this much sunscreen at this time, and this is how you're going to apply it. I said, yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And so that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, this is not where you're from. We are in a different environment. I'm going to need you to do this. And I said, absolutely. Yes, sir. And so it was a blast, dude. It was a huge thing. We made it to the top. We spent about 15 minutes on the top. We boiled water on the top of Kilimanjaro. I won't tell you the temperature it boiled at, but it was shocking. And then we started down the mountain, and we had another 4 hours ish. Was it 4 hours? It was so long, dude. It was the longest day of physical activity I've ever done. We went all the way down to Barafu Camp, back down to 15.5 or so.
Don't tell me about the descent yet.
Okay.
Tell me about the 15 minutes. Did you think epiphany thoughts, or did it just come and go so quickly that it was left to you to reflect on what all of this meant later?
We got to Stella Point, which is not quite to the top. Stella Point is like you're halfway around the crater. And when we got to Stella Point, Paulina, who knocks on our door in the morning with coffee, was there with hot chocolate.
Just waiting for you.
Yes. And I said, "What?" She goes, "Hello." I said, "Paulina, you're here." She goes, "Oh, yes, of course." And I was like, "What's happening? Like, how are you here?" And she goes, "Oh, we came up before you." And you set up.
Well, clearly, Paulina.
I was like, "What do you mean you came up before us?" And they had boiled eggs for us to eat. They had cookies, like little, like Vacation Bible School packaged cookies, but they were cookies. And we had chocolate. They were like, "Please eat." And I was like, "I don't want to eat." They're like, "Of course you don't want to eat. That's the altitude. This is the point where your body starts to lie to you. You're going to eat." "Yes, ma'am, I will eat." "Asante sano." She goes, "Caribou," and which means you're welcome. And so just very firm, kind leadership. And she wanted me to get to the top. She wanted my wife to get to the top. She wanted every one of us to get to the top. The porters and the guides are doing it for money. It's their job, but they were doing it for more than that. It was very clear to me. At Stella Point, we ate a little bit, or near Stella Point, we ate a little bit. It was actually just before Stella Point. And then we went by the Stella Point sign, which is the halfway point, and which is the tee off to go down the mountain. They said, "Okay, that's it. Uhuru Peak, right over there." We could see it on the other side of the crater. I'm like, man, we just got to make it there. And you start to get that little rush. You're like, it's going to happen. I think it's actually going to happen. At this point, we're at 19,000 feet. And like Philomena said, it's like Philemon, but the feminine version, Philomena.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "This is the point, your body's going to start lying to you. You got to push through it." So she said that about 18.5. So we started pushing and walking. Everyone was so quiet and so silent because we were focusing on that sign. A couple of the ladies, as we approached the sign, they broke down in tears because they didn't think we could actually do it when our buddy said, "Hey, this is what we're going to do," months ago. They didn't think we would actually make it there. And so we walked up to the sign. And one thing that happened on the way up, we had all got into our little line. I was behind Lawson, and then, who was away from his wife, and Tara was in a different part of the line. But naturally, as we got to within about 200 feet elevation, somebody called out, "Organize into families." So as we start to realign ourselves into our families, I'm getting in line behind Tara. She slows down so that I could catch up to her. Another man passes me so he could be with his wife. And we start to line up. And I'm looking at Tara and I'm thinking, man, she's an absolute stud, whatever the female equivalent of stud is, because she just did it. There's this determination thing that Tara has. My daughter has it as well. Like when they say, "Hey, this is what we're going to do," it's just going to happen. She will stop at nothing until the goal is achieved. I loved this experience specifically to see that in her. Like months before I even started thinking about a plan, she was already working out the logistics. She was already figuring out, we need to be at this peak for this amount of time in Colorado in order to see if you have altitude sickness. She was working all the logistics, and I was just in cruise control. And in a way, her brain took me to the peak because she had done all the preparation. She had done all the thinking for our family, our specific family. And it was really neat to just kind of get in behind her there. And I think I held her hand, but I don't remember because my brain wasn't working well. I remember trying to film her approach, and it was really cool. And I remember dropping my phone and having to pick it up, and that being very difficult. But like, there was this approach moment that was just really emotional on many levels. But I'm very, very proud of my wife for what she did and how she did it. It was really, really fun to see her in that environment. I really enjoyed it. We all gathered around the sign at Uhuru Peak. And there was one person that was off to the side, and somebody said, it was just the thing. We just knew we were going to do it. They said, hey, we're waiting on you. We're all going to touch it together. And so we waited until that individual walked over. I've got it on video. And they walked over and we all waited. And we said, okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. And everybody put their hand on the sign at the same time. Like there was nobody ahead or behind or anything. It was just all at the same time. And it was just like a common understanding. These were very good people. It was a weird moment because you're at 19,000 feet and you don't have enough oxygen to think. I didn't read the sign. I saw the Tanzanian flag. I saw the word Uhuru. I saw the word Kilimanjaro. I didn't read the rest of the sign. It was too hard to read. I just couldn't. I mean, I probably could have, but I was like, I'm not going to spend my energy reading that sign. We'll have a picture. I'll read it later.
What does the sign say?
It says, congratulations, you're at Uhuru Peak, the highest point in Africa. That's Gilman's Point. Let me just read directly off the thing. Mount Kilimanjaro, congratulations. You are now at Uhuru Peak, Tanzania, 5,895 meters, 19,341 feet, AMSL, Africa's highest point, world's highest freestanding mountain, one of the world's largest volcanoes, World Heritage and Wonder of Africa. I couldn't read that. I could, but I was talking to David, another guy that was on the trip. He's like, yeah, dude, I don't remember a lot from the top. I mean, we remember being there. We got my buddy's 50th birthday. We took hats, baseball caps up there that said 50. We all wore our 50 caps for a photo, but in terms of like remembering everything, didn't remember a lot. And so then once we did that, I'll send you a text of the photo right here. Once we did that, Shedrack says, congratulations. You know, we had a meeting. We knew you could do it. We decided as a group that you guys were going to make it. And you did. Congratulations. And then he walked over to the side, and there's a young man named Charles. He was the strongest porter. I learned later, his 20s or so. He walked over and he had a big gas cylinder. And he set the gas cylinder down. And then all the guides built an igloo of backpacks around the gas cylinder. And they started boiling water. And I got off the thermocouples and I handed him the Shedrack. And he started boiling water. And we boiled water on the top of Kilimanjaro. And we took our measurements. And we had all made our guesses to what it was going to be. And he said, the value is this. We're going to say that it boiled at this temperature. I said, thank you very much. And recorded the temperature. And then he said, very good. And then we broke it down and then we got down quickly because you don't spend a lot of time at the top. They say that for the guides, the hard part starts once you summit because you have your clients from Alabama and they have all kinds of adrenaline to get to the top of the mountain, right? But then they summit and then they have this huge adrenaline dump. And they still got to get, in our case, about 4,000 feet down the mountain. Right? And he said, we're going to have a hard time after summit. I was like, why? And I said, oh, it's adrenaline, isn't it? He goes, yes. Then we started down. So
I feel reverence listening to the story. Thank you for not doing the thing you do sometimes where you get uncomfortable because the balance of the conversation is tilting your way. It needed to tilt your way. I had nothing to offer this conversation once you got past 14.3. Nothing. I learned, I listened. What a beautiful experience.
yeah,
So you got down safely.
we did.
You've had time to think about it. Why did you do it? What did you learn? Are you different?
One of the main reasons I wanted to do it is because, you know, you and I made an episode a long time ago called Congratulations on a Life with Chapters. Your words, your title. That's what you said to me when I stopped working full time at the Arsenal. You said, congratulations on a life with chapters. And when my buddy Ty asked me and several other families, like, hey, is this something you'd be interested in doing? I realized that we are in a chapter right now in life. You get to do life with different groups of people, right? Like there are people in your community, I know them by name, great ice cream shop there. Like you do life with people where you're at. There's certain things that bond you together. Maybe it's your church, maybe it's your family. Having friendships in adulthood is a difficult thing, and it requires maintenance and something you have to work on. When my friend Ty, whom I've done tons of stuff with, when he said, hey, this is something we're considering doing, what are your thoughts? I was just like, frankly, that sounds like a pain in the butt is what I thought. I was like, man, that sounds like a ridiculous amount of effort. It sounds like it will require training that involves time I don't have. because life is busy. Then I was like, we're in the middle of life with this family and these other families that are considering this. And maybe we're not like bestest best friends in the whole world, but we are very, very good friends and we love each other and we care for each other. We're in small groups. We do sports with everybody. I was like, I got to do this for the friendship. Like, I've got to do this for the investment in the relationship. Because if you don't have relationships with others, what do you have? Like, what do you want in life? Money? What is it you want in life? This was an incredible investment in terms of time, in terms of finances. Like, this is not something you just do. You prepare for it all of the ways. And then you do it. And then at the end, I just remember looking at my buddy on top of the mountain and being like, you remember that stupid idea you had 8 months ago? We just did it. Why? I'm not really sure right now because my brain's not working. But we did it. And then we got down the mountain and we have stories for this little group of people. Like, there's a lady that was there that coaches my kids at this particular thing they do. And I have stories with her about being on a mountain, right? We have all these things. One of the funniest things was on day 4, we had fish to eat. And the question was, where do you get a fish at 14,000 feet on Kilimanjaro? I'm sure it's fresh. That we have jokes about this that's going to go forward. It was almost like a mountaintop experience with the relationships. But I feel like it's going to stay there. Like, they got to see what I do when I'm hurting. I remember one day I didn't drink enough water. I had a bad headache. Somebody came to me, and I work with his son and some stuff. He's like, how are you feeling? And I just looked at him. I said, I'm feeling really bad. I'm not okay. He's like, okay. I was honest with him. I didn't do the Alabama thing. Oh, yeah, it's going to be all right. No, I was honest, and he knew it, and I couldn't have lied if I wanted to. I don't know. There's something about going through an experience like that with people that draws out the love within yourself. You had this hard thing, and you overcame it. And even if one of us hadn't have made it, we would have tried it together. There's a lot of prayer going up to it. You can't control it. Like, dear God, please, by name, each individual person, please let this person not have the effects of altitude tomorrow. Please let their cranial pressure be low tomorrow for these reasons. And I don't know, the prayers were answered and it was great. And it was a big moment. It was a big deal.
These guys are awesome. Oh yeah.
Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata. Tembea pole pole, hakuna matata. Pande na kilionya, hakuna matata. Shika mti mkubwa, hakuna matata. Uje Shirawani, hakuna matata. Shike Mwea Kempu, hakuna matata. Pite hiyo kati, hakuna matata. Shike pale Pofu, hakuna matata. Wende pale Sedi, hakuna matata. Pale Skuli, hakuna matata. Shike Stella Pointi, hakuna matata. Wende Uhuru Piki, hakuna matata. Tembea pole pole, hakuna matata. Unywe maji mengi, hakuna matata. Jambo, jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata. Tembea pole pole, hakuna matata. Unywe maji mengi, hakuna matata. Elena mama, kwa kweli unaweza. Elena mama, kwa kweli unaweza. Elena mama, kwa kweli unaweza. Ayo mama, ayo mama. Ayo mama, ayo mama. Ayo mama, ayo mama. Ayo mama, ayo mama. Wageni wanalilia nini? Wageni wanalilia nini? Wageni wanalilia nini? Wageni wanalilia nini? Waache waone wenyewe. Waache waone wenyewe. Waache waone wenyewe. Waache waone wenyewe. Na uhuru watafika. Na uhuru watafika. Na kuchoma kitachoma. Na kuchoma kitachoma. Na kurudi watarudi. Na kurudi watarudi. Waache waone wenyewe. Waache waone wenyewe. Waache waone wenyewe. Waache waone wenyewe. Lia. Ekadamse. Lia. Ekadamse.
Kill in the background. Yeah.